Hey everyone, FusedVR coming at you, and today taking a look at the side-by-side differences between AR Studio and Lens Studio. Now go ahead, comment below if you've tried either of these and which one you like more, but in this video basically we're just going to go and take a look at some of the key differences, specifically on the development side as well as the usability side. They're both very, very interesting platforms, and we'll dive a little more into that throughout this video, but they both have their strengths and weaknesses. So let's take a look at that in this video, and let's just dive into it right now. So for starters, what are AR Studio and Lens Studio? Let's cover that really at a high level, basically get the fundamentals down. Then talk a little bit about the common feature sets, and then follow that up with pros and cons. It should be a fairly short video, but I think it's just important to just weigh them against each other. And I should make an important note right now, which is if you want to develop for Snapchat's open platform, and then you have to use Lens Studio. If you want to develop for Facebook camera, then you have to use AR Studio. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about this. You're kind of forced into these specific platforms, and that's purely because they have certain requirements, certain expectations, and just certain compilation methods that make it really hard. Like even if you wanted to use Unity or Unreal, you can't really do that and just directly plug into their platform. So I wanted to make that note really early on, that as much as we talk about the comparing and contrasting them, if you want a specific platform, you don't really have a choice in the matter, and kind of the comparisons are a little useless unless you're trying to put in feature requests or something like that. So with that said, what are AR and Lens Studio? So at a super, super high level, this is basically the social media competition between Snapchat and Facebook. If I remember correctly on the historical timeline, AR Studio was announced at F8, which was a little, like probably 9 months from the time that this video goes out. And Lens Studio, I believe, came out as a more polished product, kind of not even in beta, in around November. So there's about like a 6-month gap between when these came out. And that's purely because I think Snapchat saw that what Facebook was doing, and they were like, this is probably going to work better within our platform. We should do this as well. So that's exactly what they did. And so this is just them duking it out at a super high level, and us developers kind of are caught in the middle of this giant AR battle. They are both open platforms for third parties. So that includes you, that includes me. That really includes anyone who wants to push content onto these platforms. Now, I should say that there's a little caveat when I say open platforms. Obviously, Snapchat and Facebook, they both take close scrutiny at what you actually publish. They don't want any pornography. They don't want anything violent, anything that like fits the crazy outlines. You could technically publish that type of stuff on there, but it would most likely get removed within probably a day. So I wouldn't make a business case out of anything like that. It's a quote-unquote open platform, but there are definitely restrictions on what you can actually put out in there. They're also just game engines for specifically mobile augmented reality. Now, we'll dive a little more into kind of a comparison of the game engine side in a couple slides from now, but needless to say, they are game engines in the sense that you can create pretty much scripted interactive experiences, albeit short, to really engage with users in a kind of game-like sense. So that is what kind of both these platforms are enabling within Facebook and Snapchat. I mentioned this already, but it's specifically you're going to be building into the Facebook camera or into just Snapchat's interface, whichever one kind of depends on what you're doing. And when you go ahead and publish, you won't be like something that like is searchable per se. If you want to actually go ahead and kind of promote your app, you have to promote it through your own platforms, whether that be Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, Snapchat. That doesn't really matter. But like, they're not going to be doing any of the promotion for you unless they think it's really, really good, or you have like a specific partnership like Coca-Cola or some of those other companies have. But that's just something also to keep in mind as well. And I've said this for a couple times, but they're short, small apps. I'll dive more into the comparison of why they're short a little later. But just so you guys know, you have a 4 megabyte limit. That's barely enough to get a really high quality model into one of these applications. So keep that in mind as a pretty big constraint. This is probably one of, unless you were developing back in like the probably 70s or 80s, you probably haven't had to deal with memory or storage limitations, and this is one of the cases where that's happening. It's for good reason, because you don't want multiple users downloading like 100 megabyte app all of a sudden, but that's mainly the limiting factor there. It's mostly on the download side, not really on the computation side, but I do think it is a good constraint for what these platforms can do. So before I dive into the rest of this slide, I do want to mention, if you want to try out our Artillery Bay demo, you can just go ahead and scan that snap code. And that's one of the things that I've found really interesting about this whole Snapchat versus Facebook. It's surprisingly difficult to actually get your own application, unless it's one of the searchable ones, onto the Facebook platform. But it's a lot easier to just tell someone, scan this code on Snapchat, and then all of a sudden they have it on their device. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind, especially if you're looking at the marketing side of these two giant beasts of platform. So high-level feature sets for both of them. One, they both give you positional tracking, which is the ability to walk around your objects. And I think that's a really big deal that we've never even had in Facebook or Snapchat before. Two, you get fast deploy times. In both cases, it takes maybe 30 minutes to maybe an hour to actually deploy your application into their system, get it reviewed, and give it so that you can share it to people. That, I think, is a really big deal. If you're doing some last-minute tweaks right before you're doing a performance, whatever, doesn't really matter, but you are able to push out anything to maximize what users actually get out of your application. So that, I think, is a big deal. It's, again, I've mentioned, I'm going to keep hammering this down because you get a very small package size of less than 4 megabytes. And so that helps with download times for an end user, but it also constrains you a lot on what you can actually do. And they're both actually done in JavaScript, which I think is an interesting choice, probably to encourage web devs to actually jump in. I personally am not a huge fan of JavaScript. I've spent a lot of time in Java and C# in my past programming. So yeah, that's just kind of how I feel about the JavaScript. I'll use it if I have to use it. Like I mentioned at the beginning, don't really have a choice. But if they could have picked any other language, I'd have been a lot happier. And last thing is they have like I mentioned, a game engine-like UI. It's pretty intuitive to use. If you've used Unity or Unreal before, it should be a walk in the park to actually get started. Almost all the windows are pretty identical, which is actually a really, really nice feature. They probably actually copied out of Unity or Unreal. If we're being fair, that's probably what happened. But no harm, no foul. So speaking of Unity and Unreal, here's just kind of a side-by-side comparison of all 4 of the interfaces. So you have on the top right, we have AR Studio. The bottom right, you have Lens Studio. Bottom left is UE4, and top right is just the 2D version of Unity. Although like that, these are all kind of customized to some extent, but needless to say, you can all see that they're pretty similar. Like, I mean, even here you see that there's a preview. That's pretty much almost a given in anything except Unreal. But there's a preview for Unreal as well. You get a nice scene view in all of these cases that allow you to easily manipulate. And you can see the hierarchy of your game objects in the scene at a glance really quickly. Last thing is just your storage. You can see that is like in all of these. There's your storage and storage right here. So you have easy access to your file system. And that's really all the core features that you need to really get started with anything. And that's why I kind of dump these all into the category of intuitive UIs for development, because they give you access to everything you need within a single window, which is really nice. So diving into the pros and cons for each of them. So with AR Studio, one of the bigger things that you get is you get face tracking. So it's the ability to just at a glance have the camera match my face, and I can add any 3D effects of any kind to it. Can't do that in Lens Studio, but the benefit I see on Lens Studio is it is cross-platform, which is that in both AR Studio and Snapchat, you both get it works on Android and iOS. The advantage of Lens Studio is that it actually works on Windows and Mac for development, as opposed to just Mac on AR Studio. That might change in the future, but I do think a lot of game devs, especially anyone focused on graphics, is usually on Windows because you get a ton more graphical performance on a Windows machine than you do a Mac. So having that cross-platform nature on Lens Studio, I think will help it to develop a lot more content in the near term. AR Studio actually has, in addition to JavaScript, some visual scripting. So if you're familiar with, say, blueprints in Unreal or pretty much any node-based language, basically all that is you have a couple blocks kind of floating in space, and you can connect them to form a flow of data, a flow of information across this network that causes the computer to respond and calculate based on whatever the inputs are. So it's actually a pretty intuitive interface as far as making small applications, which I think both AR Studio and Lens Studio are trying to accomplish. So I think that visual scripting is a really, really nice touch as far as making it pretty easy to write short, small scripts. Now, I've said this a couple times, but I highly, highly think that Lens Studio has one of the better tracking solutions compared to Facebook, compared to Apple, compared to Google. It's not perfect, but I mean, at the same time, I'm pretty confident in saying that Snapchat's going to be one of those first ones that moves into the AR cloud and having permanent virtual objects at certain locations. So this just is already a good sign that the fact that they have better tracking is kind of pushing them to, I think, have their users engage with the content more. Another similar token of visual scripting, you also have node animations in AR Studio. So that's something, again, that's completely lacking in Lens Studio. And as I'm kind of going through this list and kind of breaking this down, one thing I also want to keep in mind is that these features, you might start to see some of these features creep from one platform to the other in maybe 6 months, maybe a year. These companies tend to work pretty fast. And so if they see that their competition really likes something and they don't have it, they'll probably be working towards it. So hopefully videos like this can actually push them in the right direction. And again, I've mentioned this before with Lens Studio, but they're a lot more shareable in my opinion. And here's I think the big thing. AR Studio has a 2 megabyte limit. Lens Studio has a 4 megabyte limit. They prefer actually 2 megabytes. The one thing AR Studio has going for it is they compress your actual app a lot more than Lens Studio does. And as a result, it makes 2 megabytes actually decently feasible. It's still feasible within the 4 megabytes, but that compression is something to keep in mind when you're actually looking at these numbers. You're probably getting if it's a really well optimized app, you could probably get up to 50% or more compression to actually get it into this 2 megabyte limit. And I mean, talking about face tracking, talking about visual scripting, AR Studio seems to have a lot more features in place compared to Lens Studio. Lens Studio is simply focusing on just making sure back-facing augmented reality works really, really well, whereas AR Studio is just kind of like dabbling in a lot of different things, which is good if you want the flexibility. It's bad because I do think that they're weaker in a lot of respects on these specific features. I think their shining grace is actually face tracking is one of the better features that's built into it. And with Lens Studio, I generally do think that they are having a faster update cycle and just overall a bigger community. I think that's one of the bigger things that I want to talk about here is I think you see a lot of updating and iteration within, like if you go look at the Lens Studio Reddit, if you go take a look at the Lens Studio community, a lot of people are working and iterating really, really quickly to build a lot of cool different applications. I mean, even from just the memes, which I'm not going to dive into, but like it's really, really cool to see the community and the update cycles that kind of are hand in hand going together. So I just want to say, I mean, I haven't dived fully into the AR Studio community. It could be awesome, but from what I've seen of the Lens Studio community and how quickly things are progressing there, I'm really excited to see where that goes. And the last thing as far as kind of the learning curve into these platforms. AR Studio tends to focus more on a tutorial-based approach where they give you starter code, they give you the end sample, and they say get from start to finish. We'll walk you around the way, step by step. Lens Studio, and this is actually the way I prefer to learn a lot more, is they have a template approach. They just kind of give you the code, they'll explain in pretty great detail what you want, and for me personally, this allows me to actually dive into whatever parts I want, copy whatever I want, move things around, and it really helps me just personally dive into it. So on that side, I really do like the Lens Studio approach as opposed to AR Studio approach, but I do think to each their own, and it kind of depends on what you really like. Hopefully, kind of, if we get more Lens Studio tutorials, if we also get more AR Studio templates as a community, hopefully that'll fix itself. But these are high level, some things that I've noticed across the generally kind of differences that currently exist, but maybe in the future you'll start to see some blend that are happening. Probably the tutorial templates is probably the fastest thing that'll going to be happening. So that's just my take on it. Let me know in the comments if there's anything that you've noticed that's different. I love hearing from all the different opinions and thoughts you guys have, because I do think it's interesting to break this down and see where each company has their headspace in. And it's really cool to think about how they're going to influence mobile augmented reality. And hopefully that mobile augmented reality kind of leads into augmented reality. I'm really, really kind of hopeful for that. And we'll see where that goes. So hope you guys enjoyed this. Thanks so much for watching, and if you're new to the channel, go ahead, hit that subscribe button because that helps us out a ton. And if you really like this video, go ahead and smash that like button as well. Until next time, this has been FusedMan, and I'm signing out.